The most powerful lord in London destroyed an old man's shop just to widen a road. He thought the poor shopkeeper would disappear quietly. Instead, within months, that same old man drove him into complete madness. As the old man Silas meticulously grinds rare herbs under the warm, trembling glow of a flickering candle, his wife Clara hums a low, haunting tune while mending a heavy coat by the fireplace, their shared silence echoing decades of simple, hard-earned peace. Their world is a sanctuary of emerald glass jars and ancient recipes, a place where time stands still even as the industrial gears of the city roar outside. They share a modest crust of bread, their weathered hands touching briefly in a gesture of unspoken, timeless devotion. Dust motes dance like tiny stars in the amber light as Silas smiles softly at her, a rare moment of pure tranquility in a life defined by labor and loyalty. But the sudden, violent vibration of the floorboards under their feet signals the brutal end of their grace. The shop door is kicked open with such force that the glass shatters into 1,000 diamonds, and Lord Sterling's guards pour in like a black ink stain spreading across a white cloth. "Out of the way, old fool! The Lord's carriage needs a clear path through this alley," a guard bellows, shoving a startled customer into the street. Lord Sterling himself stands at the threshold, his silk top hat and gold-topped cane a mocking, opulent contrast to the poverty surrounding him. Silas tries to stand his ground, his voice trembling but firm as he demands respect for his property. Sterling's eyes narrow with aristocratic boredom, viewing Silas not as a human being but a minor inconvenience to be swept away. He raises his heavy cane and sweeps an entire shelf of precious, handcrafted medicines onto the floor with a deafening crash. "Clean this filth up," Sterling sneers, signaling his men to finish the destruction. And within seconds, the apothecary is transformed into a graveyard of broken glass and spilled dreams. A lantern is intentionally smashed against a wooden counter, and orange flames begin to lick the oil-soaked floorboards with hungry tongues. Silas lunges forward to save the ledger of his life's work, but a guard's heavy boot slams into his chest, pinning him to the dirt like an animal. Clara screams as she is dragged into the cold street, watching the fire consume their only source of survival. Sterling climbs back into his carriage, the flickering orange lights of the burning shop reflected in his cold, indifferent eyes as he drives into the fog. That night, Silas sits in the charred, skeletal remains of his home, his hands stained black with soot and his eyes reflecting the dying embers. Clara kneels beside him, weeping for their lost world, but Silas remains eerily, terrifyingly still. He picks up a single, unbroken glass shard, his reflection twisted and sharp in the moonlight. The humble apothecary dies in that moment, and a master of psychological ruin is born from the ashes. Weeks later, Silas enters a high-end tailor shop near Parliament, draped in a stolen velvet cloak and carrying a perfectly forged invitation. He adopts the persona of Count Volkov, a reclusive eccentric rumored to possess the alchemical secret of turning lead into pure gold. His first attempt to infiltrate Sterling's inner circle at a private club fails when the guards recognize his rough, calloused hands. He is thrown out into the freezing rain, his pride bruised, but his mind already calculating the next tactical move. He realizes Sterling's true weakness isn't lack of security, but an insatiable, rotting greed for things he cannot buy with mere coin. Silas retreats to a hidden basement lab, brewing a chemical mixture that glows with an irresistible, artificial radiance. Word spreads to the London elite of a liquid fortune possessed by the mysterious Count. Silas plays the part of the reluctant genius, only showing his miracle to the most influential gossips in the city. Eventually, the bait reaches Sterling, who is secretly facing mounting debts from his lavish lifestyle. Silas uses his knowledge of chemistry to create evidence of his immense wealth, forging ledgers that suggest he owns half the mines in the north. Sterling invites the Count to his manor, and Silas walks through the gilded halls, his heart thumping against his ribs like a trapped bird. He presents Sterling with a vial of concentrated prosperity, a harmless but visually stunning chemical reaction that dances with light. Sterling is mesmerized, his judgment clouded by the prospect of limitless power. He invites Silas into his most private financial councils, unknowingly handing over the keys to his fortress. Silas advises Sterling to sell all his reliable land holdings to invest in a once-in-a-century venture in the colonies. Sterling, desperate to surpass the king in wealth, begins liquidating his family's ancient assets with reckless abandon. Behind the scenes, Silas uses his true identity to leak Sterling's shady financial dealings to the city's most aggressive creditors. He orchestrates a series of false rumors that devalue Sterling's remaining stocks overnight, creating a panic in the markets. One evening, Silas tells Sterling the gold is finally ready for harvest at an abandoned warehouse by the dark docks. Sterling arrives alone, cloaked in secrecy, expecting his final golden triumph. But instead of gold, he finds a pile of empty crates and a room full of bailiffs waiting to seize his person. The realization hits Sterling like a physical blow as he sees the warrants for his arrest pinned to the rotting walls. The police storm Sterling's manor the next morning, dragging him out in his nightgown while the neighbors watch in hushed, judgmental shock. His reputation is incinerated. His lands are seized, and his titles are stripped by the crown for high treason and fraud. Silas watches from the shadows of a nearby alleyway, seeing the man who once stepped on him, now being stepped on by the weight of the law. Sterling loses everything. His servants flee, his wife leaves him, and his grand manor is boarded up like a tomb. He's reduced to a beggar, wandering the very slums he once terrorized with his thundering carriage. His mind breaks under the weight of his fall, and he begins to mutter about a count who never truly existed. Silas feels a hollow victory, but his work is not yet finished. The final blow must be personal and final. He finds Sterling shivering under a bridge, clutching a ragged, filthy blanket, a ghost of the man he used to be. Silas approaches him, his silhouette long and imposing against the wet, cold stone. Sterling looks up, his eyes glassy and hopeless, failing to recognize the architect of his ruin. Sterling is huddled near the ruins of the very alleyway where the apothecary once stood. He is trying to boil a pot of muddy water over a tiny, pathetic fire made of wet trash. He looks skeletal, his fine silk clothes now nothing but gray, rotting rags. A group of street urchins throw stones at him, mocking the lord who became a street rat. He crawls toward a discarded bottle of wine, his dignity long dead and buried under the soot of the industrial city. He weeps into his filthy, shaking hands, finally realizing that no one is coming to save him from this hell. Silas stands just a few feet away, watching the absolute destruction of his enemy's soul with cold eyes. The power of the mind has achieved what 1,000 swords could never have done. Silas slowly removes the velvet cloak and the elegant top hat, dropping them into the mud with a splash. He wipes the grease paint from his face, revealing the weathered, honest features of the old apothecary. He walks directly into the flickering light of Sterling's small, pathetic fire. Sterling gasps, his broken mind struggling to bridge the gap between the Count and the man he once destroyed. "Do you remember the smell of lavender and sulfur, my lord?" Silas asks, his voice low and vibrating with a terrifying, ancient calm. Sterling's eyes go wide as the memories of the burning shop come flooding back all at once. Silas leans in close, his breath cold on Sterling's ear, whispering, "You burned my life for a clear path, so I cleared your path to the grave." Silas drops the original charred glass shard at Sterling's shaking feet. Sterling begins to wail, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, as he realizes he was destroyed by the very insect he tried to crush. Silas turns his back on the screaming man, walking away into the thick London fog without looking back even once. He returns to the small, modest room where Clara is waiting for him with a warm smile.